Hello everybody, welcome back to another video by Jay Bowman. This is the latest in a series of videos I plan to make in response to a request from a viewer, reviewing the lenses I use for macro, family and wildlife photography. This video covers my macro lenses. I have two lenses I use for macro photography. The first lens is my Sigma 150mm f2.8, which I've discussed in my previous video in this series, as it is also currently the lens I use for my wildlife photos. I'm going to discuss this Sigma lens again in this video, but this time focusing on its use as a macro lens. My second macro lens is this Olympus 60mm f2.8. Now, I've only had the 60mm for a few months now, but let me cut to the chase and say that I believe that pound for pound, this may be the best lens I own, and that applies whether we're talking about weight or cost. This lens is extremely small and light, and yet is weather sealed and has extremely high image quality. Combined with the in-body photo stacking ability of the Olympus camera bodies, this lens has enabled me to take my macro photography, particularly of mushrooms, to the next level. I cannot recommend this lens highly enough. I'm going to compare and contrast these two lenses, which in theory cover the same type of photography in this video. They each have their own strengths and weaknesses, and although I haven't had the two of them together for that long, I am starting to get a pretty good idea of how I will use each of them for different purposes and in different situations. So I'm not going to structure this video into my traditional sections comparing hardware, image quality and autofocus. I think that type of analysis pretty much writes itself in this instance, and you don't need me to tell you that the Sigma is bigger and heavier than the Olympus, or that both lenses have excellent image quality, or that the Olympus autofocus is much better than the Sigma. If you have any questions on those topics, please do drop them as comments down below, and I will do my best to answer them. Instead, in this video, I'm going to focus more on what I think the respective niche of each of these lenses is for my use case. Hopefully we will learn one or two things along the way. And don't worry, there will be plenty of images. I'm going to break the video down into two sections. In the first, I'm going to talk about single-shot macro photos of insects and other small creatures, which I feel is my main use for the Sigma 150mm. And then, in the second section, I'm going to talk about mushrooms, which is where the Olympus 60mm excels. Now, before I get to the first section, as this may be the only video I do where I talk about the 60mm lens, I do want to show a few images as a reminder that this lens is useful for a number of other genres of photography, not just macro. I find it handy for picking out details in landscape shots and as a very short wildlife lens. I'm not going to go into detail about these use cases in this video, but I want to include them just in case anyone watching this video is concerned that the 60mm macro lens would be limited to macro use. That is not the case. Obviously, I've already discussed my use of the 150mm macro lens as a wildlife lens in my previous video, which, by the way, I would recommend watching before watching this video. But just to show that the Sigma lens is flexible also, I will also include some shots from this lens here. Unlike the Olympus 60mm, the Sigma 150mm cannot be used with in-body focus stacking or even focus bracketing on my Olympus cameras. This means that all of the images I'm going to show in this section are one-shot photos. The 150mm focal length means that you get a good working distance from skittish subjects. Used carefully and using only natural light without flash, it is possible to get the eye of the subject at least in focus and the background suitably blurry. This is a somewhat naive and some would say simplistic approach to macro photography. Some would argue it's not even proper macro photography at all. Yet, like with my wildlife photography, with a bit of practice and luck, it is occasionally possible to get pleasing results. To compare the Sigma and Olympus lenses, let's start by taking a detailed look at this shot taken using the Sigma 150mm at 300mm using the EC20 2x teleconverter on my EM1 Mark III in 2024. This is a down-looker snipe fly in classic pose, shot while on holiday up in Northumberland. Now, I rarely use the 150mm for macro with the 2x teleconverter on. I probably had the teleconverter mounted on the lens in case I spotted any birds, and for whatever reason I decided not to remove the teleconverter when I decided to get a shot of this fly. I think the shot looks pretty nice in terms of the pose and composition, but the teleconverter has clearly had a negative impact on image quality. You can see some chromatic aberrations around the fly's eye. The image is also a lot softer than it would have been without the teleconverter. It was shot at f8, so shut down one stop from the widest aperture, which would be 5.6 with the 2x teleconverter. I don't think I actually needed the teleconverter on to get this shot. The shot was handheld at 1/40 seconds, which, considering the 300mm focal length, does go to support my view that this lens somehow has some slow shutter speed mojo, despite the lack of optical image stabilization. When I zoom in on the image, I don't see handshake or motion blur, but instead there is a bit of softness from the teleconverter, plus maybe a touch of diffraction also. I think the results would have been better if I had shot at 150mm at f8, got a bit closer to the subject, and then cropped in a bit more. The shot you are looking at is barely cropped at all. In that case, the image quality would have been better, the depth of field would have been a bit deeper, the image would have been sharper, and I think the background would still have been sufficiently smooth. This shot was taken only a few weeks after I got the lens, so I was still getting to grips with the lens and teleconverter at that point. With the benefit of another couple of years' experience under my belt, I like to think I could do a better job were I to stumble across a similar subject today. Just as an aside, the term macro is somewhat loosely used, especially by me in this video, but given that the length of the fly is pretty similar to the height of the Micro Four Thirds sensor, I think this shot could properly be called a macro shot according to the most stringent definition, i.e. 1:1 reproduction of the subject on the sensor. So I selected that shot, not necessarily for its quality, but because it makes an interesting contrast with this next shot of a marsh fly taken using the Olympus 60mm on my OM1 II in 2025. Again, this shot was taken fairly soon after I acquired both the lens and camera. It is taken at approximately 1:1 ratio at ISO 500, f5.6 and 1/160 seconds. This is a slight crop, so probably just a bit less than 1:1. Now, the image quality on this Olympus shot is better than the Sigma shot. It is sharper and there are no chromatic aberrations I can see. This is explained by the use of the 2x teleconverter on the Sigma shot. Without the teleconverter, I find that both lenses have equally good image quality. I will give some more comparisons on this front shortly. With the benefit of another few months' experience with the 60mm lens and camera combination, if I were to take this shot again, I would probably try an in-body focus stack. I'm not sure whether with a small number of shots, say 3 shots at f5.6, or a greater number of shots at a wider aperture, say 5 or 8 shots at f4. That is something to experiment with when the insects come back later this year. Finally, in this section, let's have a look at some more broadly comparable one-shot macros taken with the Sigma and Olympus lenses. I've tried to pair reasonably similar shots to give you an idea how the look of each lens compares against the other. But bear in mind that these were shot on different days, at different times of day, with different lighting conditions, and so you probably should not read too much into the photo comparison. Obviously, the 150mm is 2.5 times the focal length of the 60mm, with much shallower depth of field than the 60mm. The Sigma also gives twice the maximum magnification because it is a 1:1 lens on a full-frame camera, meaning that on my cameras, the maximum magnification is 2:1, whereas the maximum magnification on the Olympus is 1:1. In theory, it should be possible to hand-hold the 60mm at slower shutter speeds than the 150mm due to the shorter focal length, but I find that there is not a noticeable difference here. I tend to shoot the 150mm with the camera to my eye, which provides a bit more stability, whereas because the 60mm is smaller and lighter, I often use the screen at the back of the camera. The autofocus on the 60mm is much better and more accurate than on the 150mm, although for a lot of these subjects, the best shooting mode is spray and pray, and so the better autofocus of the 60mm is useful, but not as essential as you might think. Now let's talk about where the 60mm really comes into its own, which for me is mushroom photography. My technique is very simple. I use in-body focus stacking, always with a differential of 3, and I generally start off using an 8-shot stack, but depending on how big the subject is and how close I am, I might increase that up to a maximum of a 15-shot stack, which is the maximum my EM1 III and OM1 II can do, or even reduce to a 5-shot stack or less if I can get away with it. I rarely, if ever, use focus bracketing. I prefer to get everything I need in the field. I don't use a tripod. I balance the camera on the ground, or on a log, or in a pinch on my boot, or even on my knee, and rely on the camera's in-body image stabilization. I use a circular polarizing filter on the lens. I find that this really gives a lot of control over contrast, reflections and saturation, and can really change the mood of the shot. The filter cuts some light and reduces sharpness and general image quality slightly. But for this type of photography, my experiments indicate that it is worth it. So that's basically it. The combination of the OM1 II and the Olympus 60mm macro lens makes this type of shot absurdly straightforward. Now, I have tried using the 150mm from time to time for mushroom photography. Whilst it is possible to get some interesting shots using this lens in a single shot format, it gives a very different look to my 60mm stacked photos. It gives more of a documentary record of the mushrooms, rather than the more artistic photos I get using focus stacking with the 60mm. Setting aside the fact that I cannot focus stack or bracket with the 150mm, I feel that the focal length is too long and unwieldy for mushroom shots. 60mm is perfect for isolating the subject without having to move back meters away from my subject. I will now show some of the more successful mushroom shots I have taken over the years with the 150mm, together with some more recent shots with the 60mm for sake of comparison. At the time of making this video, it is winter, and the insects, spiders and other small creatures I would normally photograph with my Sigma 150mm macro lens are in short supply. Therefore, my current focus is far more on mushrooms, but I am really looking forward to the insects coming back and giving me the opportunity to refine my technique with both 60mm and 150mm. Since the insect shooting season ended last summer, I have a new laptop which makes sifting through hundreds, perhaps thousands of photos much quicker and easier. My new laptop can run the built-in AI noise reduction in OM Workspace, which I feel does a really good job with noise reduction in high ISO shots. My new camera, the OM1 II, is better at focusing, has better stabilization, a slightly better high ISO performance, and much better blackout-free and high-speed shooting, including Pro Capture. So when the insects come back, the combination of all of these features will hopefully expand my shooting envelope quite considerably, letting me use slightly smaller apertures and higher shutter speeds to improve my results. Until then, I'm enjoying my time in the forest with my OM1 II, my Olympus 60mm macro lens, and a treasure trove of mushrooms. If you've made it this far, as always, thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, why not give me a like, share, and a subscribe. Please do comment below if you have any questions on either of these lenses or anything else, and I will do my best to respond. And hopefully, I will catch you on the next video. Goodbye.